such an honor to be with such wonderful, creative people here in New York City. My name is Stephen Donziger. I live here in Manhattan. I'm an attorney. I've been asked to moderate this brief discussion. Some of you might know my situation, but I'm a lawyer who's taken on Chevron down in Ecuador on behalf of indigenous peoples and dealing with sort of frontline confrontation with the corporate world about these issues. So this movie really resonated with me. The director, Daniel Goldhaber, to my immediate left, contacted me a few months ago, and I saw the movie back then, and I just really am doing my best to draw awareness to, I think, the important questions it raises. So maybe you guys could quickly introduce yourselves one at a time, and then I'll ask a couple of questions.
My name is Daniel Goldhaber. I'm one of the co-writers, director, and co-producers of the movie.
I'm Ariella Barrera. I'm one of the actors, writers, producers, and the music supervisor, most importantly.
I'm Jordan Scholl. I'm the third writer and executive producer.
I'm Dan Garber, and I'm the editor.
Ja, te Shelon Anthony Michia, Namas Edgerisland, my destiny was a she, yeah.
Thank you for that. So maybe start, we'll go down, I think, one at a time and let everybody speak, but Daniel, maybe you could start by sort of telling us what you were thinking in making this movie, sort of what question you're trying to sort of put out there into the world via this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was a film that for us was born out of a year of COVID lockdown, from, kind of also in the wake of the Black Lives Matter protests of the summer of 2020 and the insurrection of January 6th. I think we were just really thinking about, the climate crisis has gotten to a point after COVID where everybody has now had firsthand experience with climate disruption. It's important to remember that COVID is climate, and I think that we have been raising so much awareness about climate over the last, 30 years. It's been a part of my whole life. My parents work in climate science. My first jobs in film were working on kind of awareness-raising climate documentaries. And there's always been this missing piece of, okay, you've raised awareness, you've recognized the scale of the problem, you've now experienced the problem, but how are you going to demand the kind of systemic change necessary to solve the problem? And I think in reading Andreas's book, the four of us had an immediate moment of inspiration that there was a way to kind of do what we do, which is make narrative films, and to tell a story that could, in a mainstream and commercial and entertaining way, ask this question of the kind of culture at large: what kind of tactics are going to be necessary to fight climate change, to take on the fossil fuel industry, and to meaningfully demand the kind of systemic change necessary to prevent a climate apocalypse. And so that was the goal of the film that we eventually got to through a lot of discussion and conversation, but that's really why we made the film.
Excellent. I think you did a great job sort of presenting the moral question that I think all of us who want to save the planet have to confront, which is really, what tactics are we going to use to disrupt a system that clearly is destroying the planet, and that, in my opinion, no government out there is capable of stopping. So I applaud you for putting that question out there so clearly. Ariella, is that your name?
Yes.
Okay. You did a great job, by the way. You're awesome. Maybe this level with his young energy comes in and figures out how to make a movie and get it out there. I mean, it's awesome. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved and sort of what this film means to you, both in terms of the acting experience as well as the message part of it.
Yeah, I had been kind of in lockdown with Daniel and Jordan, and we were all kind of in this state that Daniel kind of already put forward, but they read the book before me, as I think it was originally research for some other thing that you were doing, and Danny and I in a conversation about just what we could do independently, what we as artists could do that would feel important to us, that wouldn't feel like we're selling our soul. He kind of just popped into his head this idea of making this movie a heist movie. And initially, he pitched it as a piece of absolute total propaganda.
Mhm.
He was like, we should just tell people to go blow up pipelines, and I was like, ah. And you know, we'd already been engaging in this mainstream moment kind of for the first time in my conscious adult life in this discussion around property destruction. I had already been thinking a lot about this in the movements that I had been a part of, and I mean, I think there had been some really, really powerful moments around property destruction in those past few years, but I wondered what putting a movie out there without the context of this conversation that we had been having and these texts that we were reading would really look like, and what would that actually do, and what would like the human cost of this be. Like, we had to talk to activists first. Like, how do we actually do this in a way that would help the movement that we care so much about? So we immediately got in touch with Andreas, who put us in touch with other activists. And even when we brought up these concerns, he was like, yeah, here's all the criticism of my book that I love. You should engage with this, and you should engage with all these ideas. And so that was a really important thing for me, was putting the human element of it all together to really actually bring forward a message of, well, empathizing with people who get to the point that they need to do this.
That's awesome. By the way, the book, for those who don't know, is by a Swedish political theorist who, correct me if I'm wrong, but his basic proposition is that we, the citizens, need to take on the inanimate machine objects that are destroying the planet directly, which is that an accurate summation of a very interesting book?
Yeah, he kind of outlines the fact that every social justice movement in history has more or less engaged in property destruction at the very least, and that, you know, you have this target that is an inanimate object, and so, you know, is there, the idea being that if somebody has a gun to your head, we all kind of understand there's a universal right to take that gun away from somebody and dismantle it. At the very least, that's an act of self-defense. So if the fossil fuel industry has a gun to the proverbial head of the earth, do you not have a right to take that away from them and dismantle it? And that's the kind of provocation of the book.
And then sort of the line at the end that this is self-defense sort of, I think, encapsulates that. I'm going to flip down to the very end. Can you tell us your name? And I know you're indigenous, and what your indigenous nation is, and a little bit about how you got involved, and sort of what this means to you as someone coming at it from that perspective.
Earlier, I introduced myself in Navajo. I come from the Navajo Nation, aka the Net Nation, which means the people. We never saw ourselves as just individuals. We always take care of each other as a whole, as people. And many indigenous people address each other as people, as human beings. And our way of life in Navajo is to show dignity, respect, and compassion. And that goes into the word eh, which is another Navajo word which means kinship. So you're always abundant and wealthy in our elders, because I can always claim a certain elder as my grandma, my grandpa, and also my brothers and sisters. And I lost my dad back in 2014, and since I lost my dad, I still have that kinship of other men that are out there that are my dad's clan, so I can claim them as my father. So with that aspect, I walk the walk, talk the talk, and I'm really involved with my community back at home. So that effort also includes environmental issues. On the Navajo Nation, we have over 400 uranium mines that are abandoned, that these companies came through and just left them uncleaned, which has affected a lot of our people. A lot of my close friends are dealing with cancer because of these things. A lot of our relatives don't have good water, livestock's poisoned, and it's real. The last time I had spoken, I said that the front lines are everywhere in indigenous cultures and communities. So anywhere you turn, even in film, to be unrepresented, underlooked, is still a thing that we're trying to do, is create that voice. And that's why I'm really happy with this film, because it does create a topic to discuss with everybody here and give you guys that question of how can we blow up a pipeline.
Well, it seems like you guys figured out how to do that. Did just one other follow up to you? How did you get involved in the film? Like, did you know Daniel, or how did you? And also, are you a professional actor, or how did you get involved in this film?
I think as Native people, we're always professional actors because we have to hide so much in our, but we deal with a lot of stuff through laughter. I really find that a really cool place to be, and being creative in that sense, it's always there. And I believe that we all live an algorithm through our lives, through creator and the way things are processed in our being, that we're all here at the same time for this very moment. Each and every one of you guys, good or bad, whatever happened in your life, led us to this point. And now it's come to that point of like, okay, where do I need to go, and what do I feel in my heart that needs to happen? So with film and acting, I believe Creator just put me in that right spot to be the voice for back at home and for myself and for everything else. So I'm really glad that Daniel and everybody else here wrote a part for me, and they got me in the film, and been doing acting for 10 years now. So I'm really happy for that.
Well, congratulations,
Thank you.
man. You're super talented. It was
Thank
really,
you.
really a pleasure to watch. Okay, I'm gonna go to, is it Jordan? Jordan, tell us a little bit about your role and how you got involved.
Yeah, so I, in addition to working in film, I'm also an academic. I actually just defended my dissertation on Monday.
Who's there, Dr. Scholl?
But I've been introduced to Daniel through a mutual friend about 8 years ago now, and showed him some of my work and started reading his screenplays and got involved in Cam, his first movie, as a story editor, and we sort of started working on things ever since. But I had been trying to put a bug in his ear to adapt some sort of academic book into a movie for a long time, because I thought it was funny, but also interesting, right? It's a world of ideas that I think is sometimes hard to access and sometimes easier, but there's a lot that's there. And it wasn't my idea for it to be Andreas' book, but reading it, there was definitely this sense of sort of palpable excitement, the same thing that I sometimes get when I'm like in the world of ideas. And then, I mean, working with these wonderful collaborators helped to bring that into the world of character and experience and life and feeling.
That must be fun to be able to traverse the academic world and that world at the same time.
It makes me more sane in both sides.
When was the last time that like a major academic book was made into a successful commercial film? Has it ever happened? Daniel?
I don't think so. I mean, not that I know of, but I never want to claim.
Because Nomadland is nonfiction, but I think it's not academic in the way that Andreas' book is.
Yeah.
Or certainly I can say, without a doubt, the first Reverso book that has been adapted into a film.
Daniel, your name's Daniel, right? Tell us a little bit about your role and how you got involved. I think you were the editor of the movie, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel and I have been making films together for a very long time. We met in college, and back in 2009, we started working together, from like the world's worst little music videos to his first feature, Cam, and now this. But I've also simultaneously been doing a lot of other things, like editing documentaries, and so I think one of the reasons that this was such an exciting project to me was that it does have this strong relationship to the real world, and it's very naturalistic feel. And there were times when it really felt like a documentary. So the way that it engages with ideas, and then the way that a lot of the action is covered, was something that was immediately really exciting to me. And just to be able to do something that blends the heist elements, which have always been very exciting to me, and these loftier concepts. It's kind of the dream project.
That's awesome. So how can, it's important this film get out there. How can all of us here in the audience and watching help get this thing known? I mean, besides the obvious
Wait,
ways.
they're here.
Yeah.
People bought tickets. This is our opening night. Very much. Spread the word, and if you can get talk to friends and family, especially if you know people who don't live on the coasts. I think that this is not a movie that we intended for coastal audiences exclusively, and I think that I do believe that there are lots of people all over the country that will respond to what this movie is talking about, and also how this movie is talking about it, but penetrating those communities and getting awareness, that is just a challenge. So, if you have family in Denver or San Francisco or Austin or San Antonio or anywhere around the country, we're expanding nationwide next weekend, and I think just getting people to go out to the cinema and enjoy the movie the way it's meant to be seen. That's the idea, and talk about it. And after that, get involved in the movement. Most importantly.
Yeah, I mean, we were at an event last week in another city, and you know, the movie is generating a lot of interest. I think it's important that I mean, I can speak from my own experience, and obviously everyone has their own choices to make about what to do about the climate crisis, but, you know, it's extremely valuable to have a film that sort of captures young people grappling with these critical existential questions in their own way. And I thought the script was really well constructed and well written. I salute the writers. And I thought the acting was great. I thought the cast, I'm a film critic of myself. As a layperson, I thought the cast was really interesting, the different types of people and the diversity of perspectives and the debates within the film. And I think you did a great job. And I think the title was irresistible. I mean, the title of this film, look at that. It's like, how do you not want to watch that film? Is there anything else you guys would like to add?
If there's any maybe questions from
Sure, are there any
the
questions?
audience? Yeah.
Back there?
This is a question for Ariella. I thought that soundtrack was really fantastic.
Thank you so much.
And I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on some of the inspiration you had for that.
We had run out of money for a music supervisor. And then I had some friends who had some good music, so I was like, that'd be cheap. I wasn't a good music supervisor, but thank you.
The music supervision is different from the score. So we
Yeah.
you know, the music supervision is kind of licensing all the little punk tracks and
Yeah.
little bits of source music in the film, which was something that we had to kind of do in a couple of weeks of crunch before finishing. But the score was composed by another collaborator of mine named Gavin Brivik. And, you know, there were a lot of different influences to the score, but, you know, we were just really jamming on Tangerine Dream and Blade Runner soundtrack in the editing room. But Gavin also came down to set for a few days, and he actually sampled our entire desert set, so he was like finding bits of scrap metal and banging on it, and, you know, he brought a percussionist with him, and basically turned all of the samples that he recorded into kind of the sources of the score itself. So there's all these kind of mixes of the synth sounds with these natural earth sounds. I think he's one of the producers, and one of my other collaborators is credited as a natural earth percussionist in the film. But it's that was the idea, was to try to really have the land speak through the music.
Thank you.
Yes, you, sir.
Hi, my question's for the director. I'm a really big fan of the film. Obviously it takes place in a few different locations, but predominantly in Texas and in rural, barren Texas. There's no trees, there's no cities, there's no houses, it's just sky and sand. But the film still feels very intimate and personal. So my question is, how do you go about crafting such an intimate story in such an open and really abandoned landscape?
Can people hear the question? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so in terms of, you know, I think that the easiest way to do it is you just have really good actors and a great director of photography and let them kind of do their thing. But I think that, you know, in the preparation of the movie, it's really about finding your anchors of, you know, what landscapes are important, and also how those landscapes tell the story. You know, something that we spoke about very early on was that it's such a complicated plan in terms of understanding where everybody is and where everybody's going. And, you know, these are the dumb things that you get into, especially when making narrative film, which is just trying to get the audience to understand the spatial relationship between the below ground pipeline, the above ground pipeline, the fact that one's, you know, down the hill from the other. And, you know, all these things are things that you kind of determine during scouting. And once you kind of have all of that architecture in place and you figured out, okay, this is how I'm going to set up where Dwayne's truck is, and, you know, those are kind of logistical shots, then it is just about, you know, making sure that you have time to just let the actors do their thing and inhabit their characters. And so, you know, I'm very grateful to this ensemble across the board, because, you know, they really threw themselves into this movie with everything that they had. They were just really out there in the dirt, you know, moving barrels up hills for 3 weeks, and loving every minute of it. And so, I think that it's really just about having a great cast of collaborators.
How long were you guys on location out there shooting?
We were in New Mexico for 22 days of principal photography, and then we did 2 days in North Dakota, 2 days in LA and then 2 follow-up pickup days in LA. But everything after New Mexico was like a very stripped down teeny crew.
Yeah, ma'am, you in the middle there.
Hi, first of all, fantastic film, you guys should be extremely proud. Second of all, was it challenging at all to get funding due to sort of the, like, you know, the possibly controversial nature within the general public of the content?
The American Petroleum Institute fund.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we had essentially, I'm represented at CAA, and the movie is technically represented by CAA, and they sent it out to their indie financier lists, and we booked 0 meetings to pitch the film. So I think people think that like there were a lot of like doors slamming in our faces, but there was really just silence. But we kind of knew that was going to be the case.
Yeah, we ended up just kind of self-funding a trip to the Cannes Film Festival, drained our bank accounts to sneak into parties, where we could talk to rich drunk people, and then they had to change all the security measures because of us. But we prevailed, and we found the perfect drunk rich person. No, we found Alex Hughes, who rocked and let us do this movie.
So seriously, the film was financed mostly by one wealthy individual.
2 people.
Yeah.
Both, I'd say, film producers, financiers who understood that there was an audience for this movie. You know, I don't want to reduce it down to just patronage. I think I think that the indie film finance system is really broken, and it's because there's a lot of movies that are not made for anybody and not really made for the world that we live in. But I think that there are stories that need to be told about the world that we live in, and I think that we were lucky enough to find partners who wanted to support us to tell that story honestly and uncompromisingly.
That's all. You guys are awesome. I think we have time for 2 more questions. You there in the middle with your hand up? Yeah, you. Yeah.
I definitely caught the Blade Runner influence during the credits, and that led me to think, what are some of your other influences for this movie? There was that Elliot Page movie, The East, which you might have seen. Are there any sort of influences that?
I mean, all throughout, we watched a lot of heist movies that we really loved. I mean, Rafifi's an incredible movie because it's 1950, and already the entire structure of a heist movie is in that movie, which is fabulous. But also, you know, there's a movie called Nocturama that we watched a lot, which is really interesting because it's also about a group of it's a French movie, it's about a group of young people who commit a terrorist act, and it's very interested in how they feel about doing that and how they feel afterwards, and about the state cracking down on them and them leaning into that through their sense of ennui and through their sense of doom and fatalism. And it's a movie that we riff on a lot in this, and also something that I think you just spelled a way for us to think about getting into the lives of our characters too.
Awesome. Yeah, right here. You.
Okay. My question's for the editor, Daniel Garber. So the film was put together wonderfully, and I was wondering, how is it different from projects you've done before, and what were some of the obstacles you found while editing?
Great question. I mean, every project is really unique and poses its own challenges, but I think that this one was particularly challenging because of the flashback structure and figuring out exactly how to make each flashback revealing the characters' backstories into something that was pretty easily digestible and not excessive, so that you can kind of drop back into the main action of the film without really losing too much momentum, and without losing the sense of where you are in the main thrust of the story. And so that was a real exercise in condensing all the emotions and the ideas that need to be conveyed by those flashbacks into just the tightest possible structure. And there was a lot of trial and error that went into that. I mean, there were times when it felt incredibly didactic because it went into much deeper detail about a lot of the ideas, but we ultimately had to say, people should go get the book. You should go get the book. And
There's a free ebook if you've seen the movie, so
if you go to our
no
site.
excuses.
I think we'll do one more right there, sir.
So my question is for the writers. I'm curious about, I mean, like you said, the book is an academic book. It doesn't really have like a narrative and characters like the movie itself does. So I'm curious about how you went about maintaining the main point of the book and also translating that into individual people, the characters that you have in the movie, and how much creative direction or authority did Andreas have on the movie as well?
Yeah, I think we were thinking about the book and we were thinking about the arguments of the book and how to get them into people's lives. But also, a lot of this came through a research project where we were talking to people and we were thinking about both who's been on the front lines of being affected by both climate change and the fossil fuel industry itself, and thinking about how to represent something of the sort of broad sweep of that, as well as who've been on the front lines of fighting against the fossil fuel industry, which is why we have this sort of particular spread of characters that is, I think, some sort of extension of the way that the book also wants to look at the breadth of people who've been involved in direct action as a start.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the initial idea was also what would it look like if us and our friends did this, because that was kind of our only frame of reference for it. And then through just talking to people that we knew, we realized that these stories existed no more than 1 or 2 degrees of separation away from our lives already, and this actually would be the most honest sort of depiction of what that would look like. And then as well as just the conversations we were having about why write this movie, why do this, why make something like this, became kind of a really interesting, compelling narrative hook for the characters and their attention, while still being like an aspirational group about a story about a group coming together to do something effectively.
And I mean, I think Andreas was somebody who was around the project. From the beginning, he was connecting us with activists and people to interview and talk to, and he was always there for us to kind of show our work to and say, do you feel like this is capturing the ideas of the book? And he didn't give a ton of feedback. I think his biggest note on the script was that he didn't believe there were still punks in the United States. And we had to assure him that there kind of were, and that this is what they look like. But I think that ultimately, like, the other, I think something that I don't think we even totally realized until the movie was done was the biggest organizing principle from the book was the idea that this is a movie without a singular person who is an antagonist. The antagonist is just this infrastructure that's killing us. And I think that was really the thing that allowed us to organize the ideas from the book so effectively into a heist structure, is that ultimately it's a movie in which the infrastructure is the enemy. And I think that was fundamentally the thing that we borrowed from the book. And I think that, that was always something that was the novel idea that we were expressing in the film narratively, but ultimately also the political idea that I think needs to be disseminated by the movie in terms of, if the infrastructure is the enemy, how do you defeat it? And so that's I think the question that we hope that people hold with them and hopefully continue to think about and do something about. So
we have time for one. We have handlers here. We have time for one more question.
One more.
Okay. Did you have? No. Go ahead, sir. Sorry.
Hi. This is my second time seeing this. I saw this at TIFF. It was completely astounding activist work. I wanted. I'm curious to know what was the collaboration between you and cinematographer Talaya, because her cinematography is just breathtaking. It's ample times, especially getting the landscape of Texas.
Yeah, I love so Tequila de Castro, director of photography. This is her kind of her first full length feature film. She shot it at 25. She's really a force to be reckoned with. And I think that we wanted to work with Tequila because she had this like really honest, youthful, colorful, kinetic attitude to her work. And I think that there's kind of a lot of the other DPs that I met with had this kind of like they were just pitching this real moody stuff. And she was like, no, I want to make a movie that's honest to the subject matter, but I also want to make a movie that I think my dad would like. And I think that really stuck in my mind because I think that really was the two things we were trying to bridge. Is this kind of dad-ish 70s genre of heist film, and then these like really contemporary characters dealing with a very contemporary problem. And so a lot of the collaboration between us was really figuring out just how to thread that needle, because we didn't want to editorialize too much. We didn't want it to feel like it was, the camera was in these really expected heist movie places, where we were kind of really telling you, this is how intense and badass this is. We also didn't want to kind of go in that docudrama, direction where like everything is just a handheld shot that's being like, it's so real. So it was really about kind of trying to get something that was like a natural fit of those two, and then also it was about just dealing with this was a very, very challenging film to make, just logistically and in the environments that we were in, shooting on 16 millimeter, and so it was also just about trying to figure out how to preserve all of that inside of kind of having no plan and essentially improvising the shooting and blocking every single day. And so I think that all that worked in the favor of the film, but it was really about, I think we just got to a place where we really had a shared understanding of exactly that kind of like, it's heightened, it's genre, but it's also real and grounded, and it's not too, you don't feel our hand on the scales too much. So I can't speak to her technical brilliance in the film, but that was, I think, the kind of artistic and spiritual collaboration that we had.
So, thank you. Wasn't this great? Let's give this guy good luck as you guys hit the road. This is so inspiring. I'm inspired, and I've been doing this a long time. This is beautiful to see people like have a vision and make it come to fruition, to get it this far. And now it's launching into the country and into the world. And as a result, I think the world is going to be a better place for the work each of you did. And I salute each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.